Alright, so this is Rebecca Shantz with Lauren Harris in Hitchcock, and we're talking about some childhood games for the Folklore Collection project. So to start out, can you just give kind of like your name, age, basic information?
Yeah, I'm Lauren, I'm 16, I'm 21 years old. I'm a psych major and I'm from New Jersey. Yeah.
Great, so can you tell me a little bit about where you grew up?
Yeah, so I grew up in a really tiny town on the Jersey Shore. It's like 2 miles wide at its largest point. There's no stoplights. It's very, very small. And I went to elementary school in town, and the entire school, K through 8, was about 300 kids. So really tight-knit community in a good way and sometimes a bad way.
And was it single sex, mixed gender?
It was mixed gender, just sort of like run-of-the-mill public school.
Great. And did you have any siblings growing up?
Nope, I'm an only child. We just had cats.
Alright, so probably didn't play any games with your cats. Or at least not at recess.
Not at recess, sadly.
Alright, so we can start out, do you have a particular game that comes to mind?
Yeah, so when I think about recess at school, the first thing that I think of is knockout. It's a basketball game, and there was only one basketball court because it was a tiny school, so we would try to rush out to the basketball court as soon as lunch was over so that we could get in line to play knockout. And usually what would happen is it'd be either class versus class. They divided our grade into 2 halves because there were like 30 of us. Or boys versus girls, and we'd line up and someone would start by throwing the basketball and you would try to knock it out so that you didn't make a basket, and if you scored a basket before the person before you scored theirs, they were out, so they were knocked out. I was theoretically supposed to be good because I was the tallest person in my class from kindergarten onwards, but I was almost always knocked out first.
Alright, so do you remember when you learned it or how?
It's sort of funny. I never really remember getting taught how to play knockout, but at some point we all just sort of figured out how to play. I think that my friends who had older siblings learned from them, and then I learned from those friends.
Cool. And do you know how old you were when you played it the most?
We probably peaked between like 3rd grade and 5th grade for knockout, because before then it was more like pretend make-believe games, and after that we would have been too cool to play at recess.
Alright, and do you, were there particular times or places you played?
It was almost always like exclusively after lunch recess, so it couldn't have been all of the school, but all of the kids in our age range ate at the same time, and we would play after lunch.
Great. And then, I guess you already talked a little bit about who played it, but do you remember anything about kind of like why you enjoyed it, why people liked playing?
The nice thing about knockout was that pretty much everyone could play. There were always other games going on, but like box ball, for example, is only 4 people at a time, and you might not get a chance to play, and then, you know, other kids playing smaller games, it was hard to like get included, but with knockout, just everyone could play, the more the merrier.
Great. And do you know if there are any like variations to it, or if it's pretty straightforward, just like always the same?
I think it was pretty straightforward, just trying to knock people out. I remember playing horse, but I don't think we ever tried to combine them into one game.
Alright, great. And so then I just want to talk about one other game. Are there any others you enjoyed playing?
Yeah, I wasn't like super athletic, so I didn't play a ton of other sports, but I had a couple of friends who were really into jump rope. We were all really, really into jump rope. You could buy them super cheap downtown. So I remember we used to play jump roping games with like rhymes, and I guess it was a game. We were singing and chanting and jumping.
Do you remember any like specific of those chants in particular?
I remember there were always ones that started with rhymes and then they would go into counting. So there was one, Cinderella dressed in yellow, went upstairs to kiss a fella, by mistake she kissed a snake, how many doctors did it take? And then you would jump and count, and the number that you reached was how many doctors it took, presumably to save her life.
So you would like for each number you would do one jump?
Exactly. Every time you jumped, it went up, the tally went up.
Cool. And do you remember when or where or how you learned it?
I think that I must have learned that from my neighbors. I lived on a block with a couple girls my age, and we used to jump rope all the time. Again, I think they probably learned from their siblings, or else we read it in like the Babysitter's Club book and got inspired.
Cool. And again, do you know kind of like how old you were when you played it the most?
That must have been like 1st and 2nd grade. I think we would have been pretty young, although old enough to memorize a rhyme, so maybe like 3rd grade.
Cool. And you said you played a lot with your neighbors. Did you play with anyone else? Were there particular people that really liked playing it?
Jump rope was deemed girly, so it was only ever girls. There were the girls on my block, and there was a girl who had the same babysitter that I did, so whenever we hung out at her house, she and I would play together. And you could tell who was friends with who because they all used the same rhymes.
Cool. And then you started to say that different people use different rhymes. So were there kind of a bunch of different variations of the same rhyme or different rhymes entirely?
There were definitely a ton of variations on that Cinderella rhyme, and I cannot remember any others right now. But most of them ended with like, how many blank. If it was like Cinderella, it's like, how many kisses, I don't know, and you would always count.
Cool. All right, is there, and do you remember kind of like why you liked it or what the appeal was?
That one was fun because you could be competitive. Everyone would always try to get the highest number of jumps, and you could sort of go on indefinitely, I guess. People didn't get bored of things back then.
Great. Is there anything else you want to say, or is that
All
great?
Good.
Thank you.